And now, live from Jerusalem, you're listening to Israel-Inspired Radio. Here are your hosts, Rabbis Ari Abramowitz and Jeremy Gimpel.
Shalom, everybody, and welcome to Israel Inspired on the Land of Israel Network, on thelandofisrael.com. This is Jeremy Gimpel, and I'm here with Rabbi Ari Abramowitz, and we are broadcasting from the beautiful, majestic hills of Judea. I think we are the last two Jews in Judea right now. The edge of the desert, the mountains, we're the only ones here right now. But Pesach was something else. There were like a billion people here, but now it's just Ari and I here. Ari, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. Yeah, over Passover was it was the dream. You know, when we first came out here and saw this place, it was tumbleweeds and destitute, and now we had over Passover buses coming out here, hundreds of people. Everybody that comes out here seems to be powerfully touched. But I don't want to get too lost in that right now because we are here at a very special moment in time.
This is like a very special time of the year. Holocaust Memorial Day, then we have Yom Ha'atzmaut, and then Yom Yerushalayim. It's like these three modern-day Jewish/Israeli holidays that aren't like biblical holidays that are celebrated amongst, the ancients, but they are very profound experiences for us nowadays.
Yeah, they feel biblical to me. They certainly do. It feels like this is the next chapters. Where the Torah and the Tanakh end, these holidays are beginning.
Yeah. The siren today was very powerful. I was in Jerusalem, and the siren for Holocaust
Where were
Memorial
you? What was
Day.
it like around you?
No, it was just totally quiet in silence standing in Jerusalem. It wasn't like I was on a highway and people are on the highway, they pull off on the side of the road and all the cars stop and everyone gets out of their car. That's also very powerful and very meaningful. This time I was just like standing alone with Hashem in the streets of Jerusalem, hearing the siren echoing through the streets, thinking about the 6 million, and here we are standing in the streets of Jerusalem. It was just like mind-blowing.
Yeah, no, it's true. I was standing right here on my balcony. I was sitting inside learning Torah. I stepped outside, stood on my balcony, and of course, there's Arabs around us here, and many of them are like building and working, and of course, none of them stopped. I didn't have any resentment in my heart.
I don't even know if any of them know
what it's for.
The Arabs in Jerusalem, they know, because everyone is stopping. But the Arabs that are working specifically here, they're so out here in the mountains, I just don't think that they're aware.
They may not even know. That's true. That's true. But, as I was like preparing for this program, because I feel like back in the day, we used to do a show every single week. We sort of got in the mode of doing it. Being out here, it just feels sometimes like time is not our own. There's the winds of history are blowing things in our direction that we need to contend with, and we're not always able to do a show. And so, I've been trying to sort of systematize my approach. The way I've been doing it, I read the Torah portion, because we learn that, what happens in the Torah portion, it informs, it influences, it illuminates not only our personal lives, our national lives, but the entire world. So you sort of read the Torah portion, and then you reflect on current events and connect the dots and see how it all comes together. But this week, what's happening right now, it seems like the confluence of what's happening in the Torah portion, what's happening in the Jewish calendar, and what's happening in the world are coming together in such a powerful way, all tied in together. I even struggle right now. I hope Hashem gives me the words to be able to express how these things are all. It just feels like Hashem's finger is on world history, and there are winds blowing that are changing the way things have been, the way people have been. Moods in the world are changing, statuses and perspectives are changing, and that's what our network is here for, right? To connect those dots. It's not always something that can be with pure secular pragmatic rationale deconstructed. You sort of need to see it with a certain level of humility and say, Hashem, help us, give us the eyes to see what's happening now. And here we are on Memorial Day, and I'll tell you, when that siren rang and I stood on my balcony, I closed my eyes, and I don't know, when you said you were thinking about the holiday, what does that mean for you? What were you picturing?
I was thinking about all of the people that had given their lives throughout the exile, culminating in the most insane mass murdering, systematic annihilation of those Jews who were just hopeless and helpless, and then imagining them seeing me now, what they would be thinking.
Interesting. You're picturing them
looking at me,
looking at you,
and then being like, "We won."
Wow. I'll tell you, I was picturing at the beginning. I just said, okay, what is the most extreme thing I can picture to get into this in this one fleeting moment that I have to really join in my energy and my focus with the entire Jewish people in the land of Israel. And for some reason, that popped into my head was the vision of sort of women and children clawing at the walls of the gas chambers, at Jews from secular to Orthodox to Hasidim to Haredim, from leftists, right, all of the Jews coming together into these cattle cars and being shipped in these cattle cars like cattle, like sheep to the slaughter. And as I'm standing there, I thought to myself, I'm here on this mountaintop in Judea. This is why it will be never again. You know, this never again thing, since I'm a little kid, I remember never again, never again. And I think that those words are so loaded and they mean so many different things to different people. And over years, I've become existentially uncomfortable with the term never again, because I feel like it can give us a certain sense of comfort or security that if we keep saying it again and again, that indeed the Holocaust will never happen again. I don't know if you just saw today in the headline in the news, it said that in Austria, 58% of Austrians believe that something like the Holocaust could happen again. But my discomfort with it is more about the Jewish perspective and how we deal with the Holocaust, how we deal with never again. That somehow we believe that by educating the world about the Holocaust, by spending millions on Holocaust museums with the best multimedia presentations, that somehow we will never let the world forget. We'll keep it in front of their eyes all the time. They will remember what Jew hatred leads to, and it will never happen again. That somehow, you know, Yishai Fleischer wrote this article, The Clash of American Liberal Jewry and Israel Nationalism. Did you read this article?
Yeah, it's like the first thing that I have actually tweeted out in maybe a year and a half. I'm like, this is just so good. Whatever I can do, get it out there.
One of the best articles I can remember reading, because I think that on each side, especially the farther you go on each side, there can be so much hatred and resentment and animosity towards the other side. And I feel like he was very dispassionate about it. He wasn't casting aspersions. He was simply explaining why there is such a difference between the Jews here in Israel and the Jews around the world. And that by universalizing the Holocaust, exemplified, you know, even in Jerusalem, in Los Angeles, what do they call the Holocaust museums?
Museum of Tolerance.
The Museum of Tolerance. That somehow that mankind will realize that this is not just about the Jews, that this is about all people.
Oh, building the Museum of Tolerance in Jerusalem. Well, maybe you should build it in Gaza or in Ramallah, like the Jews of Jerusalem. We need that reminder. Thank you very much.
Right. But there's the hope that by making this a universal thing of all of mankind, that all of mankind will benefit, but we as the Jews will benefit from this liberal tolerance being infused into the consciousness of humanity, and that this Holocaust won't happen again to us. But I think that we suffer from this projection. We've talked about it for many years. I know I have projection. It's hard. It's part of the human experience. It's hard to see the other and really get into their shoes and see things through their eyes, because we're so in our own experience and our own perspective. But, you know, I've always had this discomfort with the Auschwitz. I'm going to be speaking at the March of the Living. They're coming to Jerusalem, and I'm going to speak to them on Yom HaZikaron, on Remembrance Day. And they've just come out of Auschwitz. And other than the fact that these Jewish groups are one of the biggest cash cows of Poland and of all of the concentration camps where the Jew hatred was most focused, they are now having this affluence come in from Jewish tourists from around the world, but not only Jewish tourists, but tourists of all different backgrounds. And we think that they're going to the Auschwitz and they'll see it and they'll never want it to happen again. But I just listened to this unbelievably shaking testimonial of this Gentile during his trip to Auschwitz. I want you to listen to this.
I first went to Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp in 2012, and as somebody who had read a lot about the history of that place and had watched a lot of documentaries, it was something that I was dreading, but I was also in a kind of way looking forward to go to a place where the absolute worst things that humans have ever done to other humans was an honor. But unfortunately, my abiding memory of visiting that place isn't actually what had happened. It was the behaviour of the people that were there. As we walked into the crematoria at Auschwitz I, a couple that were in the group that I was in decided that it would be a good moment to start kissing each other. When we walked into one of the barracks where shoes of the Jewish victims at Auschwitz concentration camp were displayed, our guide asked us not to take any photos, and not to take any photos of the shoes or the human hair or the suitcases, because these are, after all, the possessions of people who've been murdered. And the first thing every single tourist that was in my group did was whip out their phone and take a photo. And unfortunately, to my undying shame, I said nothing. I did nothing. I stood there disgusted and angry, more angry even at their behaviour than at what I was actually witnessing, because it was so horrible to see the way that people coming to this place, this terrible place, treated it, almost as if it was like an amusement park.
You know, just imagine that these non-Jewish Gentile schools are sending programs to Auschwitz, and that's what they're doing. Boyfriends and girlfriends are kissing and selfies. I mean, this is something that a lot of people already heard about, is the behavior, the laughing, the jovial in Auschwitz, where they see the pictures, they see the actual place where it happened, and it's not foundationally shaking them to the core and making them question man's inhumanity towards man. It's not doing that. We have this perspective and this hope that it will, but it's not. I even remember speaking to a pro-Israel pastor. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, have you ever been to a death camp?
Yes.
I've never been. And I could imagine going there and having so many walls up that I don't want to be shaken to my core and have my world rocked. So these, I don't know, high school kids from Europe that are going there, I can just imagine them being like, I am not ready for this deep thing right now. I'm just walls up. I'm not paying attention. I'm going to make a joke out of it.
Maybe there's not paying attention and there's walls up, but there's a difference between laughing and making out and taking selfies and making light of it and not internalizing the depth of what it all means.
I mean, I would imagine that there's some European youth that are like going there and they're like, yeah, man, Hitler, he was onto something. I wish he would have done it a little bit more efficiently. Meaning there's a whole rise now of neo-Nazis in Europe. It's not like they look at the Holocaust as the inhumanity to man. It was like that was a great achievement in Hitler's...
That was a golden era.
Yeah, golden era of the nationalism of the Germans.
But even this pro-Israel pastor, I was having a heart-to-heart with him, and he loves Israel. And he said that many of his fellow pastors, and he's like a very high up, and so that's where the pastor and politician thing sort of overlaps. And he was saying that in Poland and Hungary and in all of these various places where they must do these ceremonies and where Holocaust denial is illegal, that secretly these politicians are just tired of it. They don't want to have to go and hear the speeches and lay the wreaths. They don't want the guilt. They don't want to have it thrown in their face again and again and again. And they're tired of it, and they're tired of hearing about it. And this hope that Jews have that it will keep the hatred and the realization alive in the minds of the Gentiles around us, it's just not working that way. And this message of never again somehow is pointed or focused at changing the world, to keeping the world in check. But the truth is that on Pesach, what do we say? Uv'chol dor v'dor omdim aleinu l'chalotenu. Every generation, they're going to rise against us to destroy us. And that's a universal truth. And it always changes, it morphs, it mutates, it never looks the same, it looks different. And very often we're always fighting the last Holocaust instead of seeing what is coming up. But I see what's happening in the world today, and it's hard not to see that there is a new spirit of Jew hatred that is being kindled. It's like, when I was thinking of how to say this, I said it's like a ruach. A ruach, it's like a wind. And what is a wind? A wind is something you can't necessarily see or put your finger on, but you can feel it. Even just today, the Polish party in Poland, they submitted a bill to cut off Jewish claims on Yom HaShoah, on Holocaust Memorial Day, on purpose. They said Jews should no longer be getting claims from the Polish people and Poland on Holocaust Memorial Day.
Let me, just a little bit of history that I just recently learned. In Croatia, the Croats killed, murdered, rounded up 30,000 Jews and killed them on the spot, looted all of their possessions before the Nazis arrived in Croatia. Meaning the Jew hatred that's there hasn't really gone anywhere. I mean, what's that? 75 years, 76 years? The world hasn't radically transformed. There's this dragon of Jew hatred that's now rearing its head again. And that's just the world that we have to wake up to. And the only difference now, I don't think the non-Jews, the nations of the world, have changed at all. I think in the times of the Holocaust, they were the righteous among the nations that stood along the Jewish people, hid Jews in their homes, opposed the Nazi party, even though they had to be quiet or else they would have been thrown into Auschwitz with the Jews. And now the only difference is Medinat Israel, is the state of Israel. The fact that the Jews have now the ability to raise our heads up high and say, like, really pretty confidently, no, that's never going to happen again. And if it does happen, we are going to go down in a blaze of glory fighting.
Right, that's true. You know, I was just thinking about all of this what's happening in America over the past few weeks that we haven't done our show. Every week we could highlight and focus just on the newest wave, either the big ones that are happening, like in Pittsburgh and in San Diego, the massacres in the synagogues there, but also just every day. You know, FBI statistics show that Jew hatred, anti-Semitic attacks are over 300% higher than any other minority, which is sort of jarring. But you know, today's Holocaust Memorial Day, and there's still survivors. May they live till 120. But there was a number of them that came together, and they were saying that this is reminiscent for them, what they see happening to the world. There was a guy named Max Eisen, and he said, in Europe, in Canada, in the United States, anti-Semitism is back. It's taken on a life of its own. And it's a terrible thing. Imagine this, from the words of a Holocaust survivor, and he sees it happening again. He gave an example of an anti-Semitic incident that happened to him, where there was a poster of with his photo next to a synagogue in Toronto, in Canada, and it was vandalized. The word Achtung was sprawled on his head, and that was the word that meaning attention, that the Nazis said to the Jews. He said, I know this word from Auschwitz, and it's happening now in North America.
What does that word mean?
Achtung, meaning attention. Achtung! You know, and then the Jews would have to stand at attention. And so that was sprawled on his head. And he says, I remember that from Auschwitz, and now it's on his head in Canada and North America. This Jew hatred is fomenting with such a fervor. And when you look at it, it's almost like, okay, there's the Pittsburgh shooting, right? And that was in a Reform synagogue. And then there was the San Diego shooting that happened in a Chabad, in an Orthodox synagogue. It's not like those that hate us make distinctions or differentiate between, they're the good Jews, they're the bad Jews, they're the religious Jews, they're not the religious Jews. They don't make those distinctions. But it's interesting because there's certain demographics that are coming together that agree on nothing. This is what Prime Minister Netanyahu said. They agree on nothing other than their hatred for us from the white supremacists who have done the shootings. But there's something about the white supremacist attacks on these synagogues which is it's more pure, it's more simple, it's more honest. Okay, they hate Jews and they say that that's what they're doing. It's like very easy to understand that. But the more sinister, duplicitous hatred for Israel is really coming from the left. And that's what I think is much more concerning, from Ilhan Omar and Jeremy Corbyn to the New York Times. The New York Times were publishing cartoons like Der Stürmer. If you listen to the Land of Israel Network, we've had a number of shows that are talking about those cartoons and what they're doing. I don't want to get lost on that. But it's blatant. It's not like, anti-Zionist policies. No, it's yarmulkes on their head, Jewish stars around the dog of Benjamin Netanyahu's neck. This is clear Jewish hatred of the Jewish people in New York Times. They apologize, and then they come out with another one back to back in the New York Times. You know, I feel like I get this. I've struggled over the years when I have this message in my heart where I want to say to the Jewish people, wake up, it's not safe for Jews in America, and it's never received well, and I always have this conflict. No, just be positive, tell them about the dynamic, exciting life in Israel, and try to encourage them to come from that. The negativity never works. But one thing I always just try to say is, I'm not saying you have to leave, I'm not saying a Holocaust is coming, but just keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes open.
Ari, I don't even understand what that means. We're looking at the New York Times, which is mainstream left media. It's not radical fringe left. It is the mainstream media outlet. If you were to take that picture of Netanyahu as a dog with the Jewish star around its neck and go to Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Jerusalem, and you would put it next to any of the other Nazi propaganda, the cartoons,
fits right in.
It's like right there alongside them. So we have the mainstream Democratic Party, the mainstream left, that is seething now with anti-Semitism. They can't control themselves. They're publishing it and saying it all the time. Then you have on the right Jews being gunned down, and then you have the Muslim population in America growing at every. I mean, we are being attacked at every angle. I just said goodbye to my wife's brother who lives in San Francisco. He came over here for Passover and he made Yeridah, and he lives there right now. And I was like, all right, Shmuel, well, I'll see you later. Be safe. It's a dangerous place in California. And it was like, is that really how I'm saying goodbye to my brother-in-law? And I meant it. It's dangerous now to be a Jew outside of the land of Israel.
I just saw a Jew post on Facebook saying, does anyone else have this sinking feeling that we're sitting ducks in our synagogues? Right? A lot of Jews are feeling that way. I remember I used to have debates with Jews, and they said, no, synagogue is a place of worship. It's not a place to have guns, and there shouldn't be any Jews with guns in there. I don't think there's one rational Jew that would say nowadays, no, don't have weapons. Don't protect yourselves in the synagogues for what could happen. I mean, it's so obvious. But Holocaust Memorial Day, one of the other things that happens, I just saw Friends of Israel saying the reason is State of Israel is an insurance policy for the Jewish people. That's why it's important to have the State of Israel, so the Holocaust could never happen to them again. And that has been something that exile Jewry, diaspora Jewry has been echoing again and again, that part of the reason we have a right to the State of Israel is because without the State of Israel, the Holocaust can happen again. But obviously but there's a shift, a rift that's happening in the Jewish people that Yishai Fleischer so beautifully explicated in his article that was just on thedailywire.com. And finally, for years, I've been saying what the message out of the State of Israel needs to be. And Danny Danon, the ambassador to the United Nations, he said it so beautifully. Listen to this.
Today, I will present to you the 4 pillars that prove the case for Jewish ownership of the land of Israel. The first pillar is the Bible. The Jewish people's rightful ownership of Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, is well documented throughout the Old Testament and beyond. The second pillar is history. The Jewish claim to the land of Israel is confirmed time and again, not just with Jewish history, but with the history of the world. The third pillar is a legal claim. Our rights to the land are codified in international law, including in the documents that founded this very body. And the fourth pillar is the pursuit of international peace and security. A stronger and safer Israel means a stronger and safer world. It is through these 4 pillars, Mr. President, that I will provide you with the answers to your questions. Let us discuss our first pillar of proof, the Bible. The Jewish people's right to the land of Israel is mentioned over a dozen times in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, which includes the Torah, the Old Testament, the prophets, and the writings. In the book of Genesis, the very first book of the Old Testament, God says to Abraham, and I will read that in Hebrew. והקמתי את בריתי ביני ובינך ובין זרעך אחריך לדורותם לברית עולם, להיות לך לאלוהים ולזרעך אחריך, ונתתי לך ולזרעך אחריך את ארץ מגוריך, את כל ארץ כנען לאחוזת עולם, והייתי להם לאלוהים. And I will now read the translation in English. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant. And I will give to you and to your descendants after you all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. This is a deed to our land.
I feel like I've been waiting my entire life to hear that in the United Nations. To hear an ambassador for Israel saying the first pillar. I can imagine maybe saying the first pillar is the United Nations resolution and the international community or Jewish security. No, the first pillar is the Torah, is the Bible. And then he puts on a yarmulke, a kippah on his head, and he reads in Hebrew from the Torah in the authentic language that it was written in. And he says, this is our right to be there. Did that not give you goosebumps? I feel like maybe not for you because you feel like you would have said it better.
I would have said it better. No, but it was very good. Kol hakavod to Dani Danon. Good for him. I'm glad that someone's saying what needs to be said.
Right, and that's really what the never again means. Never again that I felt when I stood on the balcony. I said never again in my heart. Why? Because we're in Judea. Right, this week's Torah portion, Parshat Kedoshim. What does Kedoshim means? It's difficult to actually translate. You could say holy, holiness, but God tells us Kedoshim to you. We are to be a holy nation to God. Now, what does that mean, holy nation to God? Holy doesn't just mean separate. It means a different thing altogether, right? Rav Shlomo Karlbach would say that there's people that keep the Shabbat and keep the seventh day. People that keep the seventh day, okay, it's a different day than the rest of the day, but it's still a day. But Shabbat is an entirely different plane and dimension of existence, of time, of spiritual reality. It's an entirely different thing. And as the Jewish people, we are supposed to be an entirely different thing, not just a separate nation that Herzl dreamt of when he said we can be a state like all other states, a people like all other peoples, a nation like all other nations, where we have our own country. That's not what it's about. It's not having another country, and it's just one more country in the world, in the international community of countries. No, we're supposed to be a different thing altogether. A country that exudes faith in God, that lives the manifestation of the understanding that there is one God in the world that infuses and permeates everything, and that he is in charge of absolutely everything. In this week's Torah portion, it talks about you should give tzedakah, the corner of your field. What does tzedakah come from? Tzedakah, people define it as charity, but it really comes from tzedek, which means justice. That 10% doesn't even belong to you according to justice. So we have to give to the poor. We have the weaker. That's the theme, to be kind and compassionate in a world that otherwise the Nazis, the Aryans would say survival of the fittest. The survival of the fittest. The strongest are the best. What does the Nazis say? What is beautiful is good. If it's beautiful, that's great. If it's ugly, kill it. What do the Jewish people say? What is our message to the world? What is good is beautiful. It's a message of compassion. But in a dog-eat-dog world, in a survival of the fittest world, if you're compassionate to the weak, you're not going to make it because you're going to fall down with the weak yourselves. If you don't work every single day of the week, you're not going to have enough money. But we say, no, our faith is in God, and that's where the source of our strength comes from. And with that strength, we're able to actually foment a deep compassion, even for those who hate us. You know, and just one thing, Jeremy, the hatred against us is a reflection of the unique quality of who we are. I mean, the hatred of us is so transcendent. People look at this conflict that we have with the Palestinians, and they insist on politicizing it and saying it's about occupation. And when in reality, if you just look a little bit deeper, it's almost laughable. I just went to lunch with my father, and he said, he took out a newspaper and he pointed to the title of it, the headline. He said, I want to have this guy over for Shabbat. The chutzpah of this guy, who was he talking about? Abbas. Abbas, the head of the Palestinian Authority. It says that they're on the verge of financial collapse, the Palestinian Authority, because Abbas is accusing Israel of stealing money from martyrs, meaning that the Palestinian Authority incentivizes, not in some abstract way, in a very clearly obvious monetary incentivization, that if there is a terrorist, there's a sliding scale. The worse the terrorist attack, the more people he murders, men, women, children, doesn't matter, the more money they will get. And Israel's like, we're not forwarding the tax revenues to you. We're subtracting the money that you would be paying these martyrs. And Abbas has the chutzpah, the cojones, to say, how could you take out the money that we're paying
to kill you?
Just the fact that is, and that's why, to me, it's a little bit of a clear thing. People say, well, this anti-Zionism thing, it confuses things, it makes it political. Even Jews in America, they're saying the two-state solution. I feel like the two-state solution, for the average person that understands anything, to really be advocating that we, as the state of Israel, should create a state that is already run by a government that is paying its citizens to murder Jews. The more they murder, and we're supposed to have a state. We're supposed to give them their own independent state where they can have their
military.
It's insanity. It's Jew hatred of the highest order. It's saying the destruction of Israel and the wide-scale murder of the Jewish people in this Palestinian state.
Yeah. Well, listen, I was just listening today with YouTube and podcasts, and my wife Tehila. You can learn so much. And so I can't watch too much about the Holocaust because it just brings me into such a dark place. But there was a story that I heard, and I'll tell it in just a little bit, but the stats were that there was close to a majority of American Jews that did not want to accept Jewish refugees from Europe. As the Holocaust was going on, almost a majority, I think it was 40% of American Jews said, listen, it's rocking the boat. It's upsetting this country. I don't want to let more Jews in. We don't need a spotlight on us. And it's like the Jewish mind of the rift between Israeli Jews and American Jews. I mean, it's not so complicated that
You're saying you don't need a professional psychotherapist to understand it.
Well, I'm saying the Jews of America at that time, or the Jews anywhere in the world, without the state of Israel, you are a terrified person. You don't know what's going to come. You have no way of protecting yourself. You have nowhere to run. You have nowhere to hide. And you talk about never again. Just the world will never again be the same as long as there is a state of Israel. But I'll tell you the thing that really has touched my heart is just a couple of days ago, we had this group of German volunteers that came out to the farm, and they came out for the whole day. Often a group will come for a morning, they'll come for an afternoon, they'll come for an evening, a barbecue under the stars, but they came here now for the whole day.
They didn't just want the tour, they wanted to volunteer.
A full day. Yeah. They wanted to work in the fields. They wanted to sweat. They wanted to really get their hands dirty. And it was just so marvelous. We were playing music together and working in the fields together. And then at the end of the day, they all got around and they just blessed us. And I feel like that's just I don't know, I was somewhat uncomfortable with it in the beginning, but then I saw myself from a bird's eye view having these descendants of our worst enemy just, a few decades ago. And now they've come to Israel. They've gone on their quote unquote vacation, and they've come here to work and help us build up this farm. And at the very end, they were just blessing us, being blessed by the nations, by the nation that was our worst enemy. And how marvelous that was. And really
the blessings themselves, a lot of them were speaking in German, so I didn't understand. But one thing, a universal language I understood were the tears. How many of them were crying, weeping, as they were blessing us and thanking us for the opportunity to pick up trash around. They said, we want to help. And I said, the truth is what we really need. I spoke to our partners. They said that a lot of the workers here, and there's just a lot of trash around the farm. They said, we want to do that. It's not like they were we want to prune vineyards or olive trees. Whatever was needed, they were so eager and excited. And we had bags of trash that they spent hours of collecting.
The first half of the day, we were learning together, touring together, singing together. And the second half of the day, we were working, and just so marvelous. And, you asked me before, what was I thinking about during the moment that all of Israel is standing? And that's pretty beautiful. If you really think of it in a bird's eye view, it only happens, a couple of times a year. It happens on, Yom HaShoah, on the Holocaust Memorial Day. It happens on Yom HaZikaron, on the IDF's Memorial Day, all of the fallen soldiers and the people that were killed in terrorist attacks, where the whole country stops. It happens, I guess, in Ne'ilah, on Yom Kippur, where the whole country is standing at those last minutes of Yom Kippur. It's just where the whole country is standing together. It's just such a marvelous, and this shofar is being blown throughout the land. That's what the siren sounds like to me, just one long tekiah, just do, and the whole country is standing. And, I was preparing for that moment. And in the morning, I try to just have some time, and, before davening and before I pray, to listen to music and just have some time meditating. And I got into this state where I just had this story that was unfolding in my mind, kind of almost like a lucid dream. And it was of this father and his son, and they were, being taken away by the Nazis. And the whole time, the father is telling his son, I want you to know you have to have emunah. You have to have faith. All of this is for the good. Hashem is with us. because I read Modeh Ani Lefanecha like the first day of and then it says Rabbi Munatecha, great is your faith, God. And there's so many parts of davening today that are hard to say. Tov Hashem lakol v'rachamav al kol ma'asav. God is good to everyone, and His mercy is upon all. And I'm like, okay, it's Yom HaShoah today. That's not an easy verse to say. And I had this vision of this father with his son saying, I want you to know Hashem is good. Everything is okay. This is all for the good. And they're putting the father and the son in this dream into a train, into a cattle cart, and they're rushing him off, and people all around them are crying, and they're all upset, and the father's with his son, and his father's saying, just have emunah. This is really good. Everything is okay. And they're taking their father, and they're standing him in line now, and they're in line to go into a gas chamber, and the father's with his little son. He says, you have to have emunah. Everything is okay. People all around say, why are all these people around us so scared and crying? It's I don't know. I guess they just don't have emunah. But I'm saying we have emunah. Everything is good. Everything is all right. They're in the gas chamber, and people are freaking out all around them. And the son is telling his father, why are all these people so scared? It's I don't know. We just have emunah. Everything is good. Everything is for the best. Hashem is with us. And they're gassed to death, and both of them hug each other, and they're smiling, and they leave the world that way. And that was the end of my dream. And I'm like, wow, that was heavy. That was a heavy dream. And I was thinking if you had to go through the sufferings of that reality of the Holocaust, and that father was doing his very best to protect his son from any suffering, that was the best protection that my mind and my subconscious dream
was possible.
Was possible. And what koach that was to just have emunah in the worst of times. And then as they passed on to the next world, really hakol behemet l'tovah, now they're with Hashem and they're back in the oneness of the universe, and they really walked through those fires, and the father protected his son. I don't know, to me that was just such a powerful dream that I wanted to share that. But then the thing that I learned right after the siren was this amazing story that I had never heard before, and when I'm almost now 40, and I thought I've heard Schindler, and I've watched the movie, and I've got how many high school educational things about the Holocaust. This is a story of a couple in America named Gilbert and Eleanor Krauss. And they were he is a lawyer, she was just a housewife, American Jews, practically fully assimilated. They weren't observant, dati, religious, just doing the American Jew thing, making a lot of money. No, a lot, just doing the good, they're a lawyer, making a good living. They're living their life. And the documentary was about 50 children that they saved in the Holocaust. And now those 50 children, of course, have had children and grandchildren, and the Krauss family has literally changed history by doing that. And the whole story was when they first were doing what they were doing because they heard that the quotas of the immigrants weren't being met. Let's say there were 100,000 Jews allowed in a year, but only 90,000 would make it. Someone got sick, someone changed his mind, something happened. There were 10,000 slots open, but as far as the American registry were concerned, that was 100,000. It was given and it was done. And he, as a lawyer, went to the State Department and battled, and ultimately he was able to convince them to allow 50 children to escape. He and his wife flew to Nazi Germany, took a boat to France, made it to Nazi Germany in 1939. Talk about the courage of these people. But they weren't so courageous. They were just people. They stopped in France. They went shopping. They went to visit the Eiffel Tower. They're on a vacation. And on their way to the vacation, they go to Austria and they find 50 Jewish children and bring them back to America and save their lives. And the whole time, the Jewish community inside their community hated them. They're why are you bringing these Jews here? That's how I found out the stat that so many American Jews didn't want more
We've
immigrants.
tried so hard to assimilate and to become American. We've changed our names, and now there's these kids speaking a foreign language, immigrants off the boat.
You're going to upset the government.
People are going to associate us with them.
And so they had to fight, so they never really talked about it because it was upsetting the Jewish community around them so much. So the story never became famous. And I was thinking, are you kidding me? And then what happened? They saved these 50 kids. They found 50 families that adopted them, or they found their families, distant relatives, and they found their homes. And then they went back to their regular lives. Regular people doing the lawyer thing, doing the housewife thing. And they had, I don't know, let's say 4 months, 5 months, 6 months dedicated to this cause. And then they changed the world forever. They have now great grandchildren that are Jewish and influencing the world and bringing life into the world. And they saved those 50 children that have now brought family trees of their own. And it was just a brief moment in their lives. That was in the Gemara says, Yesh mi shekonesh olamo b'sha'a achad. You can acquire your world to come, or your world in this world, however you want to read it, in 1 hour. And it was like these simple people that were just regular people did something of such heroic proportions, and they just went back to living regular lives. And I've been thinking about that so much. One of the thoughts that I keep on thinking about is that, here I am, 99 years old, and I'm on my deathbed, and I can go back to this day. What would this day look like now? I just got one day. Let's make this day beautiful. And I feel like thinking like that has really helped me just make my days a little bit more like the Krauss family, Gilbert and Eleanor, that just said, this is an opportunity to do something marvelous with our lives. Let's actually make today great, because I don't know, the more I think about it, I read this quote somewhere that a great life is just a bunch of great days. And so, yesterday we were celebrating the Seudat Hodaya of Simcha and Rachel Gluck, and some of our listeners were listening to that story unfold, and now it's been just a little bit more than a year. And a Seudat Hodaya is a gathering, a feast of thanks, because Yakir Ephraim, who was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, a little boy, not even 3 years old, is now, hair is fully grown back, jumping
let me
around.
just pause really quick. There was so much meaning imbued in what happened yesterday, because when was it? A year ago, maybe just a little under a year ago, after he was diagnosed, and they started intensive chemotherapy. You could hear the story on Eve's show Rejuvenation. I think it was not this past week or the one before that. They, at a child's 3rd birthday, you do what's called an upsharon. You don't cut their hair for the first 3 years, and then on his 3rd birthday, you cut his hair, and everybody gets to cut a little piece of his hair, and then he learns the Hebrew alphabet, and many people put honey on the letters, so the honey's, it's a celebration. It's a time of tremendous joy. And because he was going to lose his hair, they preempted it. And a few weeks before his 3rd birthday, we all got together for his upsharon at this very spot on the promenade, overlooking the Temple Mount, overlooking all of Jerusalem. I'll never forget that day. It was one of the most poignantly painful. There was not one dry eye there. Many people picturing possibly the worst that could happen when you find a stage 4 in metastasized in a little boy, what could be at hand. And now it's almost a year later, we're at that very same spot. Celebrating.
It's just so awesome. And so I was thinking yesterday was such a beautiful day, and make my days great, and what a great way to spend my day, just celebrating with Simcha and Rachel. And then I was thinking over Passover, this was the best Passover of my life. I mean, every day, buses in the morning, buses in the afternoon, people coming at nighttime. I mean, the end of every night, Tehila and I would just literally pass out in bed in exhaustion.
It was exhausting,
wake up the next morning and do it again.
A lot of people were saying to me, oh, it's such hard work. You're doing such hard work. I was like, it's hard, but it's not work.
Oh my goodness.
There's nothing I'd rather do.
The best days. And then I had this, the Zohar says that if you want to understand Malchut, if you want to understand what a kingdom is, or if you want to understand the mystical dimension of the kingdom of God and how he interacts with the world, you have to look at ants. And when you look at ants, that is the manifestation of Malchut, of kingdom on earth. And you look at the ants, and each one has their own job, and they're going, they're coming, and this one's picking up, and this one's protecting, and this one's feeding them, and the queen bee, and I don't know, like the ants are all just like doing their ant thing, and that is like a kingdom. And I felt like over Passover, and when the Germans come here to volunteer, I feel like, this little ant on our little mountain, and it's like we are doing exactly what we are supposed to be doing in this big scheme of kingdom. And we are just, it's like I've never felt such great days as just being here, broadcasting from here, allowing Jews to come here, allowing non-Jews to come here. It's just been such an experience.
One of my greatest prayers, and I'm sure yours and many of the listeners out there that I've had, is I always am praying, God, please use me as a vehicle, as a vessel to bring your light into the world. And I feel like throughout our journey together in this mission we've been on, we have felt that many, many times. But since being out here, I feel like my hand, I fit this place like a glove. Like a glove. There's nowhere I can ever imagine being that would bring out all of my skills and all of my powers and my strengths, which are limited in their scope. But this place harnesses them perfectly.
And what's so beautiful is I see that so many people come out here, and it brings a light to them. They come here and they leave prouder Jews. They leave more connected to Israel. I mean, those Germans that were here for the day, they left. They are changed people. They're going to go back to Germany, not the same people that they were before they came here. And so, there was just, I'm thinking of like one family that comes to mind. We were in such a jam at one point, and it's like we're in sort of a constant jam here at the farm. There's like a huge obstacle ahead of us, and there's all these struggles.
There are brief moments where we're out of what feels like we're out of a jam.
Out of a jam, but then there's like an obstacle ahead of us that we have to overcome, but it's not like we are in the middle of a jam. And there was like, we were just like, our backs were against the wall. And this couple that we had never met before from Northern California came. They came out to the farm, and Hashem just opened their hearts and brought light into their lives. And then right when we needed it, they came and they just saved us. And it's like Hashem is somehow weaving this beautiful tapestry of kingdom together, that each person has their gifts and their qualities and their abilities to allow this to be. And it's all coming together in such just a marvelous way. And then I think about Israel, and there was a prophecy that Ari taught me, I don't know, maybe literally 10 years ago. And I forgot where the quote was, but I remember what the prophecy was. And then he's like, oh, it's in the book of Isaiah. So Ari told me it's in the book of Isaiah in chapter 48, verse 10. And it says to Israel, and it's talking about the galut, it's talking about the exile. And you want to experience the height climax of the exile, the ashes before the resurrection. We're talking about Yom HaShoah. And it says, I have refined you, not as silver. I have tested you in the furnace of affliction. And somehow, when you think about the process that the Jewish people have gone through and that Israel has gone through, and when I say Israel, I really mean the macro Israel, because anyone that attaches themselves to Israel is like just cast their lot with us. It's really talking about that movement of people that are building up Israel, that are a part of that process, being refined so much, what it took to stay Jewish, what it took to believe, what it takes to stay in Israel and not leave, what it takes to make Aliyah and leave, whether it be the good life in the 5 towns or whether it be somehow making it from Ethiopia across the desert to Israel. It's like this amazing evolutionary process that has refined the Jewish people, like the cream of the crop of the Jewish people are alive today. Whoever wasn't strong enough, fast enough, smart enough to make it 3,500 years, who has been left has been refined and refined and refined and refined and refined. And even until now, you read Yishai Fleischer's message on this, there's still like a whole rift of Jews that are lost in America, and probably in 1 or 2 generations, they will be lost into the nations. And this refinement process continues to happen.
I just want to take one issue with what you just said.
Okay.
You said whoever isn't strong enough, fast enough, smart enough. I don't know that those are the words that I would use.
The list can go on.
No, but I'm saying different.
Okay, what are the words you would use?
I'm saying those that didn't have the inner fire of purpose and meaning to their lives. Meaning there were people that were super strong in Auschwitz that didn't make it. But there were people that made meaning and made purpose and had a vision and kept alive. I don't know that I would give those physical characteristics, because in the book of Gideon, who were the ones that went to war and defeated the Assyrian Empire? It wasn't the weathered, seasoned veteran soldiers. It was the ones that feared God the most. So I don't know I would use those words.
I don't think that I meant those words is actually who could run the fast. I guess sometimes there were people that actually survived the 3,500 years of exile because they were faster. I meant spiritually stronger, spiritually more persevering, emotionally, whatever you want to call it. It has refined the Jewish people to a place where whoever has made it back to the land of Israel in this generation has been refined beyond refined. It has gone through the fires of the furnace of affliction, and it has pulled out somehow this amazing people that is different than all other people of the world. And the Germans that came here, it was just so interesting because the more I get to meet the German people, I really, really love them. I love Germans. It's weird. It's bizarre. They were our worst enemy. And every nation, they have their own identity. And people that want to say all people are the same, it's just not true. Germans came here a few months ago. They put up the most gorgeous pergola outside our ecological pond that we're building.
In the most insane weather that we've had out here in 4 years.
And they did it in one day. If they would have given that to me and to Ari to put up, that would have taken us at least 1 month. They did it in one day, and they did it in the most insane conditions. Like the German mind, it's so sharp, and they're so sincere, and they're just like all in. When they bless, they're crying. They're just such special people. And what an opportunity it is to really get to know the German people, or at least some of them, in this generation that have now turned their hearts away from like the ethos of the Nazi reality of underpinnings of the European Union, and have sought to connect themselves more to Israel and to this land and to the Torah. And
I mean, it's true as far as non-Jews that are coming out here. Jews we have coming out here from all over the world, from all throughout Israel, of all different religious backgrounds. But as far as non-Jews, I would say the number one most frequent nationality would be Germans.
Yeah, Germans are coming
Strangely
out. It's
enough.
just unbelievable. And so something so special is like happening here, a place in the heart of Judea that's healing nations. Like how special, what a time we live in. And just to know that refinement process, it's not just a refinement of the Jews that survived the exile and how strong we needed to be and how hard we just had to cling on to the Tanakh and to the hopes of the prophets and how that's just built us into who we are. And it's not just the strength of the Israelis now that have to go out to war every few years and who have to fight in reserve duty and live through the challenges of Israel. And it's not just that, but there is a whole world of the nations that are a part of this process, and they are being refined just as well. And man, the furnace is hard. They have to be different than everyone in Europe. They have to be different than everyone in America. And they are like going against the grain. With the rise of anti-Semitism, it's going to get harder and harder to stand with
And there's
Israel.
no running away from it either. I mean, this last attack at the Chabad in San Diego, sometimes there's little stories, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a little anomaly, right? And one of these stories that happened in San Diego was this family. It was that were in Sderot. And in Sderot, there's like months that go by where they have alarms going off constantly all the time. They're forever vigilant. Their brains are already neurologically circuited in a way where they're ready to pounce and run at the very sound of the alarm. And they left Israel. They went away. The refinement, the pain, the terrorism of living in Israel and Sderot was more than they wanted at that time. So they left. They went to San Diego, and there they were during this terrorist attack. And this man, he jumped up and grabbed his niece and ran. He was shot in the leg. She got shrapnel. And they're in San Diego. There's like nowhere to run. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to run. You can't run away from what it is to be a Jew. The Jewish identity in the world. There's a difference, however. There's a difference between being in the exile and being in the land of Israel, where you're surrounded by your own people, by your own nation, by an army of Jews, the first Jewish army since the times of King David. There's a difference there, but it's not something that we can run away from. So if we can't run away from it, let's turn around and embrace it. Right? What does King David said? Ach tov v'chesed yirdafuni kol yemei chayai. Goodness and kindness will chase after me all the days of my life. If it's chasing after you, it means you're running away. And so I think those people who are struggling with their Jewish identities, what it means to be a Jew in the world today, rather than running away from it and hoping that other ideologies or liberalism or right-wing or conservatism, whatever identity or ideology it is that you're hoping to embrace, that they will accept you, they will not accept you. You will always be a Jew. So rather than running away from that, turn around, look it in the eye and embrace it, because there's nothing greater than living as a Jew, especially in our world today, where we see the ingathering of the exiles from all around the world. They're coming back to the land of Israel. We have our own state. We have our own nation. We're sending the cheapest machine ever to go to the moon. The technology, the innovation, the light that's coming out of the Jewish people in Israel is unparalleled. And that's part of what we're trying to broadcast here on the Land of Israel Network and share that message. So all of you, may you have a meaningful Holocaust Memorial Day, and may we go into Memorial Day as a nation together and into Independence Day and experience the pain and the joy. As King David says, he who sows with tears will reap with joy. Let us feel those tears and embrace them, and then we could truly enjoy the light and the joy of our times, all of us together.